Mark. Oh my gosh.
Hi, Michelle.
All of
How
you
are you?
guys from the good old days that I haven't seen in forever.
I want to see if there's actually a bar that she can come up with that Chris hasn't been to.
Maybe I need to share, right?
Great to see you.
Yeah, if you could, Tina.
Yeah.
Thank you. So good morning and good afternoon and good evening, because Michelle's all the way from Geneva visiting with us today. Thank you so much for joining us for this virtual walking and drinking tour of Chicago. It's great to see so many friends and familiar faces today. All of you probably know me. My name is Maggie Gissel. I'm the executive director for ISEC Life, the Alumni Association for ISEC in the US. So, you know, as ISECers, we've all been bitten by the travel bug, but the past 18 months have really put a dent in our ability to move around. So we thought, why don't we bring one of our best, finest US cities to all of you? And thanks to two of our guest speakers today, we are able to share with you why the city of Chicago is one of our country's great gems. It's known the world over for its architecture, and all of us here know it's greatly known for its watering holes. So I hope for those who don't have, I have a beverage on hand. It's early here in California. It's only a little after 10 a.m. So I have my mimosa ready to go just to put me in the mood as we take a virtual stroll through the Windy City. So I want to introduce our two speakers today. Tina Hurley, she's a native Chicagoan and is president of Horizon Contractors, Inc. It's an electrical contracting company that she started on her own in 1996. She honed her entrepreneurial spirit in ISEC at the University of Illinois at Champaign-Urbana, where she was LCP. She was on the national training team. She attended UNO Congress, and she also took a traineeship in Turkey. She's married to an ISECer, and she and her husband live in Chicago with their young teenage daughter. Tina's been a volunteer with the Chicago Architecture Center for 10 years, and it is thanks to her that we're all here today. So she's going to share with us all of her Chicago insight and her stories. And luckily, very luckily for me, Tina is also a volunteer, has been the volunteer of our Chicago hub, and is currently our newest ISEC Life volunteer accountant. So thank you so much, Tina, for bringing us all together. Sean Parnell has yet to find a Chicago bar he doesn't like. When not out exploring and writing about Chicago's most interesting taverns and bars, Sean is busy as president of Innovaxis Marketing Consulting, where he helps software vendors, technology integrators, and manufacturers with B2B marketing experience. He hails from ISEC, Northern Illinois, where he also served as chair for their BOA for 4 years. Sean's ISEC traineeship was in Finland. He created the Chicago Bar Project in 2000 and has written about Chicago's best taverns for Esquire, Time Out Chicago, and About.com. And to connect all of these dots, Tina and Sean are founding members of the Thursday Night Club, which served as an inspiration for Sean's book, which I happily just got, The Historic Bars of Chicago. So thanks to Tina and Sean and their many Chicago ISEC drinking buddies who paved the way for our virtual tour today. So just a few housekeeping notes. You know, if we were in person on the streets of Chicago in the bars, we would certainly ask you to please stop, ask questions, share a story. For those of you who have been in Chicago, maybe you could just drop that in the chat so we know, is it your first time visiting Chicago? Have you been there many times? Have you lived there? This is a very casual, we want to make this fun. So while they're speaking, if we could just keep it quiet, maybe mute your mics, but if you want to open up your mic and ask a question, Sean, Tina, we're all willing to address those. Or if you feel more comfortable, you could put it in the chat and I'll be looking at those as well as we go. So now I'm going to hand it over to Tina.
Thanks, Maggie. It's so funny when you hear your own bio read back to you, sort of, to a degree. I'm like, oh, did I do that? Oh, okay. But we're here today to talk about Chicago history and architecture and historic bars. And so, like Maggie said, I'm a volunteer docent with the Chicago Architecture Center, and I've been one for 10 years now. And so what this presentation is today is the actual Chicago Architecture Walkthrough Time Tour that I give to the public, which is a 90-minute walking tour, but since we're doing it via slides, it'll go a little faster, and we can just sit here and have some drinks and chat about it all. So it's a semi-chronological tour, but we're going to intersperse it with some talks about some historic bars and things that might have been going on at the time. So we will get started here. And So the photos that I have are actual pictures that I took a couple weeks ago as I walked the tour, and just so some of them look like you're walking or the view that you would be kind of seeing. So, and then I think people have been putting in the chat where you're from, because so the way we usually do the tour, and I'm doing this just like how I would do the tour. So I'll start here and talk a little bit about the Chicago Architecture Center. It was founded over 50 years ago, initially to save a historic house on the south side of Chicago. And since then, it's grown, and its mission is to inspire people to discover why design matters. And we do that a variety of ways, educational programs. The actual center has a museum now with displays and exhibits, and our walking tours. And so, like I said, I've been doing this for 10 years now, and now there are over 400 volunteer docents like me. So I'm from Chicago, and I think in the chat it has come up, people are from the Bay Area, other parts of Chicago, New York, we know Geneva, where else here?
Atlanta.
Lauderdale.
Yeah, so it's great for everyone to be here. So actually, let me go back here for a second. So we're gonna go way back in time, back to before Chicago was a city. And this is kind of what it may have looked like. So, you know, we go back several hundred years, and there was no one living here in the Chicago area, which is at the intersection of a river and Lake Michigan. Our first permanent non-native resident was Jean-Baptiste Pont du Sable, and that's his house there on the right. He was of Haitian descent. He built a fur trading post at the intersection of where the river met the lake, and so he was our first permanent resident here. And directly across from there is Fort Dearborn, which was built in 1803 and was built by the United States to protect the Northwest area. So I don't think DuSable was here when Fort Dearborn was built, but his house was still there and other people lived in it after that. So the city of Chicago wasn't incorporated until 1837, but you know, obviously there were people out here prior to that because it was a important location to the countryside. Let's see. So this is what the river might have looked like way back when. So we went from this to a developed area. Chicago became the center of transportation in the mid 1800s. And one of the reasons why was in 1848, actually, let me back up a little bit. In the 1760s, two French explorers, Marquette and Joliet, had come through the area looking for passageway to the Mississippi River, and they found it coming through what we now know as Chicago. They came through the rivers. There were some little tributaries. They carried their canoes, and they found passageway to the Mississippi River. But it wasn't until 1848 that this became the Illinois-Michigan Canal, which connected basically the East Coast to the Mississippi River down to New Orleans. So at that time, Chicago became the center of transportation. And so therefore the population continued to grow. The population was doubling in the late 1800s, went from 500,000 in 1880 to 1 million in the 1890s. And so, but this is kind of what the river looked like then, because there was transport of goods all throughout the country. But this is what it looks like today. It's a beautiful river. It's kind of a similar view. You can see the bridges there. So again, when we're talking about for this particular tour, where it starts is right along the river, and that's why we tell this river story about how it was a shipping canal. There was all this commerce, and now it's this beautiful river. So this bridge that you see here. This is the Michigan Avenue, also known as the DuSable Bridge. So on the other side of that bridge is where Jean-Baptiste DuSable's home would have been. And so this is where the story starts. Some other stories about the river too. You might have heard that Chicago reversed the flow of the river at some point. The reason for this was, so originally the river would flow into the lake like it would normally do, but that was Chicago's drinking water. And so they realized, okay, wait, we're contaminating our drinking water, so we can't do that. Let's reverse the flow of the river, just let everything go the other way, and then we'll have clean drinking water from the river. So what I like to say too, then is that, you know, we reversed the flow of the river, and we did that by, they dug deeper so it would reverse the flow. And then it flowed all the way down to St. Louis, which they bottled up and sold back to us as Budweiser. You know, so, you can believe it or not, you know, but but when we have people on the tour from St. Louis, it's always kind of fun to share that. So this is, again, the same view of the river. And in our normal walking tour, we'd be walking along the river. And so this is where people take pictures. We're kind of, you know, cruising along. And you know, this is a different view of the river where you can see the river walk that has been there for a while, but in the last several years has really developed. They've added cafes, restaurants. They've built it all the way to the lake now. So it's great that way.
And Tina, when did they start dyeing the river green on St. Patrick's Day? How long does that go back?
That I don't know. I don't know, Sean, if you know anything about that. I do know that it was the Plumbers Union that started that. They and now I think they sell tickets for you to go on the boat with them for them to put the dye in the river every year. But I don't know how long that's been going on. But it is quite a sight.
Is it environmentally safe?
Yeah, it is. It's like an orange powder that they put in there and it turns green. I don't really know what it is, but it's something that they use in their trade. I think to, you know, so that they can see where the water is flowing.
Oh, okay.
You know.
Yeah, they started in 1962, and it's plumber's dye that was initially used, which they used to find leaks in pipes. And if you haven't seen it, I mean, it is a bright, bright neon, almost green.
I see Dennis is going to be in Chicago next March 17th, so he can check it out then.
Wow.
They do it early in the morning too, and then it lasts all day and some into the next day even. It's amazing how it can do that.
Dennis, I think you better buy a ticket onto this plumber's boat. Get the tickets early. I bet they sell out.
I'm going to be with 1,200 marketing students.
Oh.
Well, I'm sure a number of them would like to go on the tour too.
We have the first of our polls. We're just adding a little trivia to our tour here today. This one I'm sure all of you will get, I hope. So I want to just give you a little bit of time. Here we go. Which one of the following nicknames is not associated with Chicago? The Windy City, City of Big Shoulders, the Second City, the Circle City, the City That Works.
That would be
Let's see how smart everybody is about their Chicago trivia. I mean, of course, no one better pick the Windy City, we know. I mean, that's the one I'm most familiar with. That's all the hints I'm going to give you.
Oh my goodness. I'm going to not get this right. I'm sure of it.
Let's see.
Do you want us to guess, Maggie, or?
Yeah. Pick one. There looks like there's 3 more people who haven't participated yet. There
Come on, Chris, get on the ball. Come on.
No, I had already submitted. I didn't know if we were supposed to say it. Hey, so Tina, I would just say, so when I moved here in 1990, you know, that river area wasn't so nice, right? You know, my favorite view is sitting on Michigan Avenue and looking around and just doing a circle. I mean, and I didn't realize Fort Dearborn and all that till recently was there, but that's my favorite view in Chicago. But that river area was kind of rough, right? You know, if you walk up now, it's just spectacular. I really love going there.
You used to have to go up and down the stairs because it didn't connect in between. So you had to walk up and go back down. Yeah, and it wasn't very nice. There was nothing there.
Yeah, it's gorgeous right now.
Which is the building that has bricks from all over the world?
That's the Tribune Tower, which used to host a newspaper, the Chicago Tribune, but it is now residences. It's been converted residences.
Okay.
Tina, what year was the Great Fire of Chicago? I mean, I know I'm jumping the gun, but
you're jumping, just wait.
Tina, I don't know if your tour is going to go there, but at some point I would love to understand like the 2 levels of the city because I got hopelessly lost.
Yes,
so
that is also on this tour.
Okay, I will leave it, but please, you know, you're going to have me with bated breath I almost paid extra for an Uber because I was on the up and I was supposed to be down, or the down and the up. And like, what the hell are they talking about?
This is great because it's like we're on the walking tour, because when you're walking, people just feel like, what's that? What's this? What's that? What's this? You know, so it's like, okay, we're talking about what we're talking about, you know, who's that guy over there? What's this? You know, so it's fine. It's all good.
Okay, so real quickly, I don't know who thought the Windy City wasn't a name for Chicago, but the correct answer is the Circle City. And the city that is known as the Circle City is actually Indianapolis. But all of those other terms, the Windy City, City of Big Shoulders, the Second City, famous for comedy club, and the City That Works, those are all associated with Chicago. Thank
Yeah,
you.
I was almost picking Circle City, but okay, fine.
I think I got it.
Right.
Well, and I would just
There is the loop, so I thought that was.
yeah, that's actually true. But I would just say that the Second City isn't because of the comedy club. Obviously, Second City, the comedy club is amazing, but it's because of New York, right? Isn't that right, Tina? It's like always,
So, yeah, I mean,
it was always Chicago was the second city behind New York. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Exactly.
I always had that competition with New York, but we are the much better city. So I'm sorry.
And speaking of New York, you know, that's what led to the nickname, the Windy City, because it's not anything to do with wind, natural wind, shall we say. So Chicago is not even in the top 10 of windy cities in the US, but rather, and does anyone know why it was called the Windy City and what New York has to do with it?
Full of hot air.
Yeah.
Politician.
Politicians. Yeah.
Well, it was actually because of the 1893 World's Fair, and Chicago was bragging so much about winning it that the New York press, you know, dubbed it the Windy City from all the bragging. So the hot air is actually correct.
I know that.
Oh,
Yeah.
gosh, I should have bet on my own guesses.
Should have had wagers.
So the next slide here, so now we're going to interject with some historic bar information. So Sean, I don't even know if you saw these photos, but this is what Maggie put together just to kind of show where Wolf Tavern might have been.
Yep. So the Wolf Tavern was the first tavern in Chicago. Predates the city. It actually started in 1829, but it was gone by 1834. Started by Billy Caldwell, now memorialized with a 9-hole golf course in the north part of the city. But and actually, he was nicknamed Sauganash, which means Englishman in Potawatomi. And his mother was actually a Potawatomi maiden. So started up the tavern, which actually served as a store, a courthouse. Actually, the first crime in Chicago was 1830, a theft of $34. And so the perpetrator was actually tried in the Wolf Tavern, found guilty, posted bail, and promptly ran off. So, and it's called the Wolf Tavern because the guy that took over for Caldwell actually claimed that while he was in his storing meat in there, that a wolf came in. Wolves were common in the area at that time, and that he claimed to have fended off the wolf without aid from any weapon or anyone else. So that hot air may have a long history here in Chicago. And now the Wolf Point is actually, they've done a lot of development in that area, and train tracks run all below there. But so it was around the site of the Riverbend condominiums, which is one of the most recent buildings in the area.
All right, so now we're going to go back in time again, and I will call on Paul. Does anyone know what happened exactly 150 years ago yesterday? Paul?
Was it the Great Fire?
It was.
Okay, right. Yeah, well, yeah, you know, they taught us in school that was the not really the best, but that was where, you know, skyscrapers were really reinforced after the fire.
Right. So what else does anyone know anything else about the Great Chicago Fire that started 150 years ago yesterday?
Wasn't it started by a cow?
Oh, no, but that's a common misconception. So it had been a long, hot, dry summer, and on October 8th, 1871, 150 years ago, the Great Chicago Fire allegedly was started by Mrs. O'Leary's cow kicking over a lantern. And it was a terrible fire. It burned down, most of the downtown area. At that time, the population was 300,000 people. It left 100,000 people homeless and 300 people died. And when we're on the tour, again, if you're not that familiar with Chicago, but like just southwest of downtown is where Mrs. O'Leary, the O'Learys lived, and where the cow allegedly kicked over a lantern and started the Chicago fire. But in the 1990s, the City Council of Chicago had a declaration and they exonerated the cow. So there were no cows harmed in the, in this declaration. But they say now that it was probably their neighbor, or no, they said it was probably just the wind, but the neighbor was also potentially accused, Pegleg Sullivan, who was, he was drunk and he knocked over the lantern. But again, it was very dry. It was very hot. It was windy. And the reason why it was so devastating was because most of the city was made of wood. And so one of the things that we talk about too is that, oh, well, they thought that the river would protect, the rest of the city. But when the fire got to the river, because the river was so polluted and full of all the gunk and carcasses of meat packing and things like that, it just like jumped the river and so burned, the majority of downtown. Even the sidewalks were made of wood at the time. So, Paul was saying before about how this is how skyscrapers developed. Yes, it enabled Chicago. Some people think, would Chicago be here and be how it is if there hadn't been a fire? So so that's open to discussion because other cities had fires, but Chicago did it a little differently. They changed the rules. They said no wood could be used in the downtown area. They made some regulations, but they rebuilt and they rebuilt quickly.
Tina, it's amazing. Only 300 people died.
I know.
It was such a wide conflict. I mean, it must have been like firebombing, where it just whooshed through everything. So that's, or unless people could see it coming and were able to flee, I don't know. But with 100,000 homeless and only 300 dead, it's really quite a miracle.
Whenever I say that statistics too, I think about it, I'm like, yeah, that's not, it doesn't seem, as devastating except for, the property, damage and, and all that.
Tina, how many days did the fire go?
I want to say it was 3 days. I can't remember.
Several days.
How many?
I said it went several days. So I think that's part of it.
Several
Like,
days.
people could see the fire coming and they're like, okay, let's run away from it.
Yeah.
And so I think that's one reason why there's probably not as many people that died.
Okay.
So.
Right.
Wait,
but
did
still,
Mrs. O'Leary's cow survive?
I'm not sure, but I mean, the O'Learys were run out of town. I mean, since it's the 150th anniversary, there's been a lot of talk about it lately, and even their descendants are trying to clear their name.
But it's got to be Chicago. You've got to have a story. So did you say Peg Leg Sullivan?
Yes.
Oh, I love it. Okay, Peg Leg Sullivan. All right.
There've been bars named after him, I think. And it's like, oh, there used to be one before. So speaking of bars, we're going to move on to another one here, the Green Door Tavern.
Just a quick word about Peg Leg Sullivan. So he's the one that sounded the alarm, and his mother owned a cow in the O'Leary's barn that he frequently fed. So that's where suspicion resides to this day. But the Green Door Tavern was actually it was built right after the Chicago fire, is made of wood, and is one of the last wooden structures anywhere near the vicinity of the loop. So it was built before they passed the ordinance against wood frame construction. So it dates back to 1872, and there's been a number of things since then. It was a restaurant for a long time, was a bar during Prohibition, which you can still, in the basement, you can still visit that. It used to be just kind of a room, magicians gathered there for a monthly meeting. Now they've turned it into a bar within a bar. But so the green door is quite old, and even it leans noticeably when you're in there, and even the lean is 100 years old. And it's actually survived other fires within the building. There was one time a car crashed into the corner and into the green door, which, by the way, is a euphemism for a speakeasy, which is where the bar gets its name. So it also survived the patronage of Dennis Rodman while he was at Bull. And Bill Curtis's studios is right behind it. So he's been known to head in there for a pint every now and then.
And where is this, Sean, more or less?
It's River North. It's on Orleans. I forget the cross street, but it's
Okay.
Okay.
a little west of the river.
Okay, well, just a short diversion. Is Sullivan a common name in Chicago? Because there used to be a Louis Sullivan who Franklin Wright worked under for a little bit.
Yeah, I don't know if they're related.
Right. Okay.
A lot of Sullivans around.
Yeah, a lot of Sullivans. So again, we're still on 1872. And so some people think that, the skyscrapers just came out of the ashes of the fire, but it really didn't, because Chicago needed to rebuild, and they needed to rebuild quickly.
And Mr. Otis hadn't invented the safety brake yet to make skyscrapers available.
Correct. Actually, I don't
Sorry,
have.
I just
about
had
that,
Google advertising
but
for my
that's
company.
true. So this is the first building. Again, on our walking tour, we'd be walking in a sort of loop, and we would come to this building. And this is the view you would get from the street. So it's not the best built views of the buildings, but this is just how it is. So this is a Page Brothers building. It was completed in 1872, designed by John M. Van Osdel, who was the first professional architect in Chicago. So it's the building right behind the L tracks there. It's not very tall. So since they had to rebuild quickly, they rebuilt in the same way they knew how, just not using wood. So this is called load-bearing wall construction. And that means you're building brick upon brick, and the walls are holding up the structure. So you can't really build very tall. So this is, several stories tall. But what's interesting about this building is that it has a cast iron front. And what that is, it's basically cast iron that's bolted to the front of the building. It's mainly a decorative element. It has the window openings, and we'll get a closer look at it in a second. They used cast iron as a structural material for a while there before the fire, but they realized that it wasn't fireproof. And so during that Chicago fire, there were like rivers of molten, cast iron that had disintegrated there. So they could not use it as a building material or as a structural element. This was just more for decorative purposes. So this is it a little bit closer up. And so here you get a closer look of the cast iron front. So these columns, so this is, bolted to the front of the building. I did actually check this because I wasn't 100% sure. I was able to stick a magnet on here. So it is cast iron. And so it allows you to have these large window openings. So this Page Brothers building, they were leather workers, or they were a leather store or manufacturer. And so that first floor would have been probably a retail store, and the floors above that we saw earlier would have been their offices. This is now a Chick-fil-A, by the way. So, it's all repurposed here. And
So do the columns serve anything but decorative, did you say? Are they providing any structural support, or they're just there for looks?
They're just there for looks and to create the window openings, because, but I probably in the past served more as a structural element.
Okay.
So this is just some detail of some of the decoration there.
Is that the tin ceiling on the inside?
Now this is I probably should have had I wasn't taking very good. This is on the wall.
Oh,
on the outside of the building.
Oh, wow.
So in downtown Chicago, there are only two buildings that have cast iron fronts. The Page building is one of them, and the other is the Berghoff building, also completed in 1872. This is not anywhere near this building. I just threw this in because this was on a similar tour, and I just wanted to show it, and it's also a bar. So here, it's the building on the right that says the Berghoff, or the doors. That's the part that's the cast iron front there. So that was completed in 1872, also load-bearing construction. And it's unknown who the architect is of that part of the building. And here's the nighttime view, so you can have a better look. So like that, the building on the right, that's the cast iron front. It kind of is like this Italianate style. So that was a very popular style. So that was what they used. So I don't know if Sean wants to interject here with anything about the Berghoff, since it serves two purposes here. Completed in 1872, a year after the fire, and it's a bar.
Right. Yeah, I just did a quick search. So it says Louis Sullivan hired Frank Lloyd Wright in 1880 something. So he must have been really been big right after the fire or something. I mean, Louis Sullivan. He must have benefited from that fire. He's done a lot of work there, I guess.
Interesting.
Yeah, but I don't know if he's related to Peg Leg. That's the thing.
All right, of course. Right.
So
Right.
I don't think he caused the fire in order to become
No,
a better
no,
architect.
of course not.
Now we're talking about conspiracy theories here.
We're going down that rabbit hole there, Tina.
So the Berghoff was started by Herman Berghoff, who actually resided in Indiana, but came to the Columbian Exposition in 1893. So the World's Fair, which celebrated, it was 400 years after Columbus discovered the New World, so to speak. So anyway, the Berghoff itself was founded in 1898, but was in a different location until it moved here. And then they actually did not function as a speakeasy during Prohibition. So they actually took the high road. It was a restaurant. They actually sold soda instead of beer. And then there was, but it was only male patronage. So can anyone guess when they actually started to admit female patrons?
Kind of a
I think it was when I was in college. I mean, it was super late.
1980?
A little earlier.
1962.
Close. It was 1969.
Say
What?
what?
really?
Yep,
Repeat that, Sean?
1969.
Wow.
Oh.
So
They couldn't even eat in there.
Well, they couldn't eat in the bar.
actually,
Women
we-
could eat in the restaurant.
yes, in the bar. That's exactly correct. So now there was a bit of consternation some years ago because the Berghoff announced they were closing after over 100 years. So and this following some other notable places like Marshall Field's being taken over by Macy's and so forth. So I think they closed in February, March, and there were lines around the block in the middle of winter to have a last meal and drink there. And then about a month later, they reopened as 17 West at the Berghoff. And the story there is that the wait staff was unionized, and the ownership didn't care for that. Felt that it was a drag on their profit. So they closed up to break the union, and then they hired new people, non-union, and then 17 West kind of reseeded, and then it became the Berghoff again. So bit of a questionable tactics there, but that's part of their history.
And then
Is it open now? Because I tried to go there in June and it looked like it was all closed.
yeah, so this picture was taken about a week and a half ago, and their signs are said we are open, so they are
Okay.
open. And then
Okay,
just one
good.
more tidbit about the Berghoff. Sean mentioned that they were not open during Prohibition, but when Prohibition ended, they do have liquor license number 1, which they have framed in the establishment. So
Don't they also
One
have something
more
at
exciting fact on the Berghoff, during Prohibition, when they couldn't make beer, they actually began making root beer, and they still make their own root beer, and you can still go in there and order a root beer, and it's excellent root beer.
Yep, indeed.
Don't they have an installation at O'Hare? I feel like I walked by that this summer while I was on my way to Des Moines.
they probably do. I mean, they've been around for a long time, so they're probably one of those Billy Goat pizza and Berghoff at the airports. All right, I think Maggie has another poll for us.
I do, because this is a drinking kind of crowd. I have another poll for us about famous cocktails. So, which of the following cocktails is Chicago famous for? The gin fizz, the old fashioned, a French 75, a gimlet, or a cosmopolitan? So please place your guesses.
Well, I don't know the answer, but someone's gonna have to tell me where the French 75 is, because I don't even know.
That's my favorite drink. I love it.
What's in it?
It's sparkling, the champagne and lime and creme de cassis.
Okay.
And that, wait, is everybody in? I have two more people. Here we go. All right, this is another smart crowd. The majority of you guessed correctly. The old fashioned, it's arguably the most popular of Chicago's famed drinks. So it's a cocktail pretty true to its name. The first recorded mention of this cocktail was in 1803 in a newspaper where the editor mentioned a drink made of a combination of spirits, sugar, water, and bitters. I'm sure there's people on this call that drink an old fashioned. I believe it's whiskey, right? Is it rye or whiskey? Is that the same thing?
A bourbon or rye. And actually, there's a great bar called the Victor Bar near me that does one with mezcal. So it can really be anything you want.
And as someone who used to
Usually
work in
bourbon.
the liquor business, whiskey is a generic term. You've either got Scotch, rye, or bourbon, depending on which wheat or which what's the word? Not wheat. Grain is prevalent in the Scotch or in the whiskey. So, like Canadian whiskey is predominantly rye. So Crown Royal is rye based. But anyway, there you go. It's the only thing I know about alcohol. Besides how to drink it.
That's the only thing.
Very educational, thank you.
And one thing too is there's also a cocktail called the Chicago cocktail, which is champagne, brandy, and triple sec.
I gotta try that.
Wow.
That would have been
Interesting.
too easy to guess, though. So
Yeah. And we're not famous for it because we've never heard of it.
The most surprising thing I learned about this when I did my little research was a Cosmopolitan. Who knew it was created in a steakhouse in Minneapolis? Because I just think of Cosmopolitan and Sex and the City and Sarah Jessica Parker, but apparently it was developed in 1975 at the Cork and Cleaver Steakhouse in Minneapolis. So there you go.
They're trying to be cosmopolitan.
So, yeah.
All right. The conversations we're having are awesome, but I know we're sort of limited on time and we're, but so I'm going to try and go through some of the buildings a little faster so we can just chat more. But so our next building is the State and Lake Building, completed in 1917, designed by Rapp and Rapp. This year is a little late. This type of construction was in the late 1800s, and it's hard. I don't know if you can tell, but if you just look at this building, what do you think it was used for? When it was first built. I don't know if anyone can
Like a hotel?
make a guess.
No, too many windows for a hotel. Well, it could be a hotel room, a hotel kind of. Let me see.
This
Manufacturing?
This
I
picture,
would say textiles.
this picture is supposed to give you a better idea, but again, we're not in person and I didn't zoom in far enough. So the State and Lake Building, so this particular picture, that arch there, you can't really see it, but the decorative elements there are musical instruments and
Flowers.
I think flowers. So this was actually a theater. It was the State and Lake Theater.
Oh,
But
wow.
if we go back, you can see there's lots of office space on top, because at that time, even not like now, arts don't pay the bills. So these were multi-use buildings. They would have a theater, but then they'd have office space that they could rent out. But this style is considered. Let me see if here's a better picture of the entire building. So after the Chicago fire, they were building this load-bearing wall construction. They needed a better way to build. Chicago was growing, the population is growing. There's lots of manufacturing, lots of industry here in Chicago, so they needed office space. And so what developed was what they is now known as the Chicago commercial style. And so this construction is skeleton frame construction. So as opposed to the load-bearing wall construction, if you imagine your own body, your skeleton holding yourself up, and your skin is just merely a coating, outer covering. This building was skeleton frame, where the vertical piers and the horizontal spandrels it's like a frame, skeleton frame construction, which would have been made of steel, metal, some kind of metal at that time, steel today. And then the outside is merely a covering. The glass and the brick are just decorative, not decorative, but just to keep the elements out. But they also had to make it fireproof. And so they would wrap these columns and decorate the building with terracotta, which is a high fired glazed brick. It's made locally. It can be made any color and any shape. And so this building is clad in brick and terracotta. And they would also use that to fireproof it. So this was a common use. But so now with the skeleton frame, they can build a lot taller, but they don't know how to build a taller building, or they don't know what one should look like. They've never built one before. So part of the Chicago commercial style is it's called tripartite construction. It's 3-part construction. And so if you look at this building, the base here is like right here, the 2-story base here, it's like one section. And then you have this upper part here, right here. I'm trying to pretend I know what I'm doing at this pointer. 3-part construction. So they went to the 3 parts of a classic column: the base, the shaft, and the capital. So here's the base, the 2-story base, and similar floors up the shaft. And then the capital is the decoration here on top. And so this is what they call tripartite construction. And so this became common for all the buildings around Chicago. So the architects for this building, Rapp and Rapp, they were known for their theater design. And so that's what they were known for. And so this actually served as a theater. It was vaudeville. It became a movie theater at one point, and now it's the ABC Studios. I think we saw here before ABC Studios, their logo and everything. And it's hard to see here, but in this window right here, you can see an Emmy statue. But I don't think it's Oprah's. I mean, like Oprah she had her start here in Chicago on ABC TV.
Yeah.
I don't think that's Oprah's statue. But so this is the State and Lake building, the Chicago commercial style. Okay, so around that time, in the early 1900s, I believe. Sean, can you tell us about the Green Mill?
Yeah, so the Green Mill is one of the oldest continuously operating watering holes in the city. Dates back to 1907. And it started off, it was more of a roadhouse. It was much larger than its present incarnation. So they had sunken gardens, and actually people would go and visit St. Boniface Cemetery nearby, and they'd stop in there for dinner and drinks. It was also near to the SNA studios. So Charlie Chaplin would stop by after filming before all that moved out to Hollywood. So it was acquired a little bit later, changed up a bit, turned into, became Green Mill Gardens because of the sunken gardens out back, which aren't there any longer. And then ultimately Green Mill. And it was leased, quote unquote, by Machine Gun Jack McGurn, who was the perpetrator of the St. Valentine's Day Massacre as part of Capone's gang. And today, if you go in there early and maybe tip the bartender, he may show you the trap door under the bar, or under where they stand at the bar, that leads down to a series of tunnels that leads across the street and elsewhere around the block. So they operated openly during Prohibition. So they paid off all the politicians, cops, and kind of like McSorley's in New York, that some of you may know, they paid off everybody. So if they had to go in and bust them at some point, they'd phone first. So it was actually remodeled in the 40s to its present really more cocktail lounge vibe. And Dave Jamillo, actually, this is an uptown in Chicago, which this is where, when people exit the mental health system of the state of Illinois, they often go to halfway houses in the area. So that's why uptown has a bit of a legacy for crime and other difficulties. And during the 70s, 80s, there was, in the period of urban decay, that those of you who grew up in the area probably remember well, uptown was particularly terrible. And this was basically a heroin shooting gallery. And there was actually the wall sconces, which lights come out of, people would keep their needles in there. So Dave Jamillo bought it, has become kind of a famous guy in Chicago because he resurrected the Green Mill. He renovated it, kicked out all the drug users, brought in some of the best jazz acts worldwide, I mean, in my opinion, Green Mill is, if it's not the best jazz club in the world, it's in the top 10 for sure. So it gets a lot of famous clients. It's been a lot of movies. It's been in a lot of TV shows. They film here quite a bit. Of course, pre-COVID, we'll see what happens from here, but it has survived. It is open, and went by it actually today. If you ever you're in Chicago, great jazz. And though there is one thing, no talking during the jazz performances. So the bartenders are constantly shushing people because getting a whole room full of people drinking to be quiet is not an easy task.
Sean, there's a question in the chat. How many times did we frequent this one with the Thursday night club? That's from Sandy Dixon.
Not enough. That's all I can.
We actually did go there a lot on Tuesday nights because there was a band called the Mighty Blue Kings, like a swing band that would play every Tuesday. And, you know, ice deckers are kind of thrifty, you know, you try and go early to not have to pay the cover, and then you just wait. So you pay in drinks instead, I think is what happens.
And then try to imagine all of us being quiet. That did not happen. We were shushed a lot.
Yeah. Well, the Mighty Blue Kings, I think, were in Swingers, aren't they?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I mean, it was inspired maybe, but you know, similar to them. So this is just one picture of the Marquette building, which is like a better example of that Chicago commercial style we just talked about in the State and Lake building. You can see that three-part construction there a lot more clearly. One thing I didn't mention on the other picture, and you can see it here too, these windows here, these are called the Chicago window. And a Chicago window, you know, we like to put our names on everything. It's a big pane of glass in the middle and two windows on the side that can open and close. This is how you got your ventilation, your fresh air in the 1890s. So
and the lobby of that building is very cool. They have actually mosaics of the Lewis and Clark expedition.
Marquette and Joliet. You mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a Tiffany designed Tiffany's mosaic. So that's the Marquette building. That was just you know, an extra building. Okay, so now we're moving on to the old Dearborn Bank, which is now the Virgin Hotel, completed in 1928, also designed by Rapp and Rapp. I think, you know, because we're in the same neighborhood, there's a lot of buildings designed by the same people. So again, here we see it's hard to tell here, but it's a little modified tripartite construction. Again, the three-part construction, the base, the shaft, the capital here. Let me see. So Richard Branson, you know, came in and renovated this, and it became the Virgin Hotel. Let me see if this next picture is. So I don't know, it's really hard to tell here, but if you can kind of look, there's some details here, and I'll just tell you what they are. There's squirrels on the front of this building. Why would there be squirrels on the front of this building?
They killed a lot in the building of the building.
It's the old
Irish.
It was the old
Irish.
It was the old Dearborn Bank, and there's squirrels on the front of the building.
Fur trading or for?
Oh, squirreling your money away?
Yeah, squirreling your money away, you know, so. So one of the reasons why this bank was where it is, it's, you know, we're in the northern part of the loop. We're close to the river. This area was not that developed. Was the last part to be developed. This, you know, a little bit further south here, the central part, the central business district was developed first. But Dano Burnham, who was a famous architect here in Chicago, he designed the World's Columbian Exposition. He had the 1909 plan of Chicago, and one of his ideas was to build the Michigan Avenue Bridge, now known as the DuSable Bridge, which connected the, you know, two sides of the city. So the north side of the city ended up becoming more developed. So now there was a need for these banks. So there was a little bit more commercial development in this area, and this was converted to a hotel in 2015. And actually, you know, on the bar note, they have an awesome rooftop bar that Bob and I have gone to, I know for sure, and probably other people. So now here's this is an interesting story. We put this here just because of the sort of the time frame of the early 1900s, and Sean can tell you guys a little bit more about tide houses.
Yeah, so Schlitz was most that were started by Schlitz survived today, but these are breweries, bars that were actually owned by the brewery. So in the English tradition, they were tied to the brewery, so they could only serve beer from that brewery, and they would lease them to the proprietor of the bar. And then inevitably, once they drank their profits away and went bust, they would just replace them with somebody else who would continue to serve their beer. So a couple of ones Chicagoans know really well, Shuba's and Southport Lanes. Southport Lanes is presently closed, faces an uncertain future, but Shuba is actually just a couple of blocks south of it, is still going, and they've got a restaurant next to it that they created. But you can see the architecture here is pretty impressive. You can see the Schlitz logo from in bas relief on the Southport Lanes there over to the left. There were some other breweries that did the same, but the Schlitz ones are, I think they were the highest quality construction. So they've lasted the longest. There's also one in Roscoe Village that's a Starbucks. So they're not all still bars, but Southport Lanes, Shuba's, and Skylark and Pilsen, which is another brewery, or at least Shuba's and Skylark are still open. Southport Lanes, hopefully it'll be reopened, and it's called Southport Lanes because they have 4 bowling lanes in there with hand set pins. So there, the sign above where you bowl says, if you see legs, don't bowl.
Nice.
So our next building now is the Chicago Motor Club, completed in 1928, designed by Holabird and Root. So this is just a block away from the Virgin Hotel. So now we're moving to a different style. Is anyone familiar with what style this building is in? Is it?
All.
Would that be international style?
No, that's not international.
Art Deco?
Yes, Art Deco.
I was,
So Art Deco refers only to the decorative style of the building. It has nothing to do with the construction or anything like that. So this was originally the Chicago Motor Club. This is skeleton frame construction, and most of it was done off-site, and it was completed in 265 days. So that was one of the things that the skeleton frame allowed you to do. You could build things very quickly. So Art Deco refers to the decorative style of the building. So this came out in the 1920s. There had been an art fair festival in France, in Paris at the time, where Art Deco became popular. Some of the influences were because King Tut's tomb was excavated around that time. So some of the geometric patterns of those Egyptian patterns, and the use of animals and flowers and geometric patterns and things like that are all influence Art Deco style. And so this was the Chicago Motor Club. Let me see here. So before Google Maps, there was something called the Motor Club. And if you needed directions to get anywhere, you would go to the Motor Club and say, I'm taking a trip from Chicago to California. How do I get there? And they'd put together, I was told this by people on the tour. I didn't know what it was called. It was called a triptych. So it'd be like a book that would have your route planned out. You could stop here and all this. So, eventually the Chicago Motor Club it wasn't needed. So this was renovated into a Hampton Inn in 2015 after being vacant from 2004 to 2013. So this is you can see a little bit more detail here on some of the Art Deco elements, that oriel window where it kind of bows out like that. The vertical style is streamlined. That was all very Art Deco.
The AAA used to do triptychs, and they're still in business. AAA.
My husband works.
I used to triptych when I was road tripping from where I grew up in New Jersey out to University in Arizona. They would triptych it for me because I'm that old.
Yeah, no, I mean to say yep to that. So this is inside. I didn't get a chance to go inside a few weeks ago. They weren't letting tours go in there, but this is the inside. It's been restored. So this is the lobby of the Hampton Inn. So here to the right, all the ice stickers want to know the bar is there. But this map on the left side here is like basically the U.S. and it showed the 2 roads that went to California essentially. But again, all the Art Deco details are preserved here. The elevators. They even have a Model T or Model Model A car up there. And they've kept some of the decorative elements like the metal finishes, that same Art Deco style.
So Mary works for Otis Elevators. Mary, should we just assume like Otis Elevators are in all these buildings?
I would love to assume that. I think it's likely that at this era a fair number were, but I would love to research that. But yes.
Okay.
I'm already thinking I need to go and see those elevator doors when I'm in town next time. They're beautiful. I'm
As
a
a
dork.
random useless piece of information, another thing I learned from my days in liquor, because one of our champagne houses was Perrier Jouet, which was a Art Deco styled. If you've ever seen the painted flower bottle, it's in that Art Deco. And one of the things I learned from them is Barbara Streisand has a huge collection of Art Deco ornament or whatever art in her house, from the lamps and whatever. So every time you kind of keep saying Art Deco, I'm thinking Barbara Streisand. So go figure.
Well, speaking of famous people, she's not on this list. Barbara Streisand
okay.
is not famously from Chicago. I believe she's famously from Brooklyn, I think. Those of you on the call from Brooklyn. But here you go. Which of the following famous Chicagoans was not born in Chicago? Jennifer Hudson, Hugh Hefner, Walt Disney, Bob Fosse, or Michael Jordan? Hopefully everybody knows who those folks are. You know, Jennifer Hudson, beautiful singer. She was on the, what was she Dreamgirls, totally popular now.
Yeah,
Started,
but wasn't she one of the, didn't she make her fame
American
from
Idol.
American? Yeah.
yeah. And then she won an Oscar for Dreamgirls.
And wasn't she like the second runner-up? Didn't she like famously lose out on to the top idol, and she was
believe so.
second, but then had a bigger career?
Oh, okay. She didn't lose
Well-
to Kelly Clarkson, who was the first idol, but okay.
Well, I
Could
may
be.
be wrong.
You know, oh, just make it
I
up.
never really watched American Idol, so
No.
don't put faith in me.
Anybody else want to participate? If not, I'm gonna call it out. So you are right. Michael Jordan, even though he's Michael Jordan was born in New York, he's synonymous with Chicago. He led the Chicago Bulls to 6 national basketball championships and earned the NBA's most valuable player award 6 times. But Walt Disney, Bob Fosse, famous choreographer, and Hugh Hefner, everybody knows Hugh Hefner of the Playboy Club, and of course Jennifer Hudson, who we spoke about. But yeah, Michael Jordan, even though I just assumed he was from Chicago, he is not. So there you go.
Okay, our next building is the Carbide and Carbon building, completed in 1929, designed by the Burnham brothers. So these were the sons of Daniel Burnham. And I'm going to ask Michelle, does this building remind you of anything? Since you were just talking about something.
About Art Deco.
No, well, you're talking
Barbara
about
Streisand. Is it her
liquor.
nose?
Your liquor.
Oh, yeah.
Look like anything to you or remind you of anything?
Could it be? No, I've only been to Chicago twice.
No, it's just it's a green. It's green. It's gold.
It's a bottle of booze.
Does it look like a champagne bottle? Maybe. Could be. So Carbide and Carbon was a battery company. This was their headquarters right on Michigan Avenue. And when they built their headquarters, they wanted it to be distinctive, and so they made it look like a champagne bottle. So they used green terracotta, they had black granite at the base, and they had gold on top because they want to impress their clients. This is a zoomed in picture. So this is also Art Deco. This is actually my picture that I took here. That's why it's dark, but so some people, assume the style where it has that tower that's kind of set back as part of Art Deco, because you think of the Empire State Building or other buildings like in New York where the tower is off to the side, or it looks like a tower might look like an armchair. And I used to associate that with Art Deco, but it was really a zoning change here in Chicago in the 1920s. They didn't want to become like New York, where all the buildings went straight up and created caverns, on their streets where it was dark on the street level. So they were telling developers, if you want to build your tower, if you want to build your building taller, which would increase your rents and everything like that, you'd have to set back a portion of the tower so that it would create an opening to come down to, bring light and air down to the street level. And so that's why we have these distinctive styles that we used to associate with Art Deco, because they're built at that same time, but it was really more of a zoning change. And so it's like a complicated math thing. You set back a portion of your tower. In this case, they set it back to the front, or they set it to the front of the building. If you start looking around, you'll notice this more in big cities, that, the tower is probably to the back or to the side, to create that space.
And Tina, just for those who may not know, that there used to be an office in this building of a company called Business International, which got acquired by the Economist Intelligence Unit, of which there are 3 alumni of that company on this call, because they were big ISEC supporters way back when. That would be me, Maggie, Randy. And this is where the old Chicago office of EIU was, or BI prior to that. And a gentleman named Frank White, long ago, was on the one of the board of directors of ISEC. And BI was big ISEC supporters way back when, and this was their Chicago office.
Nice. I didn't know that. Cool.
So yeah, so they said it looked like a champagne bottle. Oh, and actually at that top, or I believe there is actual gold leaf at the top. The other areas are like gold paint.
Beautiful.
Okay, so now we have a little section here on some bars. Sean, there's the Matchbox here, and then we also have Rainbow Club and Simon's.
So
I don't know how to group these together, but I can't remember.
well, the Matchbox is, I believe, Chicago's smallest bar, hence the name. It's actually kind of, if you were to take a matchbook and put it on its side, it's roughly the same shape, where as you go to the bathroom in the back, it kind of tapers. So there's a handful of bar stools, and that's pretty much it. And then they built this Silver Palm next to it, which ironically was a parking lot that had a larger footprint than the bar itself. But the Silver Palm is actually the name of a train, and you could eat in a train car in the back. But it closed, unfortunately. Matchbox is still open. It just changed ownership, but it dates back to the 40s. So this is one of those places where if you want to talk to other people in a bar, again, this is pre-pandemic, but hopefully it comes back. This is a good place to do it. Spend a few nights in there, and you wind up talking to everybody in there and hanging out. So very cool place. And then these two, Simon's actually functioned as a speakeasy during Prohibition. Rainbow Club was actually a burlesque. But Simon's actually, I just saw this, that Time Out picked their top 5 neighborhoods in the world. And Simon's is in number 2, which is Andersonville. It was founded by Swedish people from Sweden, and Simon's is the last Swedish bar in the area. There's still a Swedish restaurant or two. Svea, I think, is still open, and Sather's also. But this is a great place to go. Dive bar. More stories about this place than I can get into, but Rainbow Club is actually in Ukrainian Village, and is actually still have the stage there in the bar where performances were held. And this is old stomping grounds, excuse me, of Nelson Algren, who wrote Man with the Golden Arm, which was about a boxer, and actually featured Frank Sinatra. So both some of the best dive bars in the country, different parts of the city, but fantastic places.
So we are walking past the Carbide and Carbon building. We're going to turn around and we're going to look down the street. And you see this tall black building in the background. This is 875 North Michigan Avenue, completed in 1969, designed by Skidmore, Owings and Merrill. It's called 875 North Michigan, but lots of people know it more as the John Hancock building. Right. And we still call it that, but when I give tours, you can't call it that. What's distinctive about this building? Why do people recognize it?
The angle.
Yeah, the angle and like the cross bracing or whatever, you know, like the X's. So this is still skeleton frame construction, but because it's so tall, when it was built, I'm sure when it was built, it was the tallest building in the world. The cross bracing is to help support the building. This was designed by Skidmore, Owings and Merrill. The principal architect was Bruce Graham. The engineer was Fazler Khan. They're famous because they also designed the Sears Tower, now the Willis Tower, which was the tallest building in the world for a long time as well. So this is where they started using computer-aided design. So it's very distinctive in the skyline. They imagine this is like a bridge standing vertically. You know, when, you know, they associate this building sometimes with the city of big shoulders, where, like, you know, we're supportive, that Chicago can support, big buildings as well as, everything else. So this was the new technology here is the cross bracing.
That is an Otis installation as a Chicago Motor Club, which I found on Google.
Nice.
This one I know because this is where I started my job, the summer of '98. We had an office in there.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
So this building is residential and offices, and there's retail. So again, lots of buildings in Chicago are multi-purpose. My understanding is where these cross bracings go, you know, you're blocking some window views, but apparently those apartments are a little bit cheaper than other ones because you have these cross bracings going through your view here. Okay, so right near here though was the Playboy Club.
Well, and actually in the Hancock building, there's a bar on the 96th floor, which is actually 2 levels above the observatory. So I've never been to the observatory because I'd rather go to the bar. But the Playboy Club, yeah, located nearby. So that was started by Hugh Hefner. And so you'd actually be served by Playboy bunnies who were discouraged from dating the clientele. And actually the Playboy bunny outfit is patented, if you can believe that. So Playboy clubs are all gone now. They actually, Hefner was inspired by the old Gaslight clubs, which also was a member type of establishment. And I don't know if it's still there, but there was a Gaslight club out at the Marriott at O'Hare. It was like the last one in the world. So not sure it survived COVID or not, but yeah, the building unfortunately is gone now and something has replaced it. But yeah, Hugh Hefner, of course, being from Hyde Park, got to start with Playboy. I believe Marilyn Monroe was in the first issue.
What's a Gaslight Club? What makes that unique? I've never heard of that in particular.
Just kind of, they were popular in the 1900s, kind of an old time, 1800s kind of feel.
Okay.
So with, waitresses and, kind of flapper style,
Okay.
clothing, that sort of thing. So Playboy Club was like a more modern version of that at the time, but still had, members held key cards. They actually had keys in the originally, and then it went to a card. So it was a members only type club.
Yeah, Dennis, you had a question? You need to unmute, Dennis.
Yeah, I had a Playboy key card
Oh,
back in the day.
What can you tell us about going there? What was it like?
Oh, it was great when you're young and fancy free, and but it was like look but don't touch.
what city? In Chicago or somewhere else?
New York. But I did go to Playboy in Miami. I think I went to Chicago. I don't know, but I know I went to Miami, the club, and I went to New York. And I think also in London, they had a club in London.
Shock of a life. I have actually been to the Playboy Club in Chicago. I did not have a key. I was there for some event, and this was when I was back in college, but maybe the year before I was in ISEC. It's hard to really remember exactly why a bunch of us were there, but we were, and bunnies running around. They had special trays like to hold all the drinks, like where the stemmed glasses could hang down, like those things in your dishwasher that keep the stems up. The trays were like that.
But you didn't wear bunny ears, did you?
I did not. I was there as a patron drinking. I was not working there.
Clear. Yeah.
And also in my life, I have known 2 different Playboy bunnies, one in Chicago, and let's just say that the outfits that were patented were amazing, because both of these ladies were very flat-chested and were dumbfounded when they were selected to be a Playboy bunny, and they put the outfit on, and nobody knows how, but even the employees were shocked,
Wow.
Other wonders. That's funny. Before we move on, Randy had a question, and in case we had to lose people, because I know we've gone past the hour, and thank you so much for sticking around. We just have 2 more polls and a few more photos, but Randy wanted to know Tina and Sean's top 3 jazz and top 3 blues bars, if they can recommend in Chicago. And maybe if you want to say them or put them in the chat, if you need to think about it, that's fine too.
Well, he already said the top jazz was that one we saw early on.
I know. The Jazz Showcase is also good. That's down by me, and it's in a historic building in the Dearborn Station. They've moved several times. They used to be in the Blackstone Hotel, but now they're Dearborn Station. My daughter had her piano recital there on a Sunday afternoon, like up on stage of a jazz club, which was kind of interesting. For blues too, I would say Buddy Guys. I think it just reopened. That's down here on the south side. He actually plays there in January. He has he has all his performances there in January. And then I think Sean would probably agree, like Kingston Mines up on Halsted. I have no idea if it's still open for blues.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's still, I would assume so, actually. But Kingston Mines is a great place for blues. Right across the street is Blues. That predated it because Kingston Mines was located over on Lincoln. But actually, with Kingston Mines opening up across the street, it actually helped both clubs. So now it's kind of on the north side. You got two great blues clubs right across the street from one another. And Kingston Mines always has a band going because they have two different stages. So if one room's packed, you know, and they're playing, you can't get a seat, you can go to the other room and they alternate. So which is quite cool. And another jazz club is Andy's in River North. So if you don't want to schlep all the way to uptown to the Green Mill, Andy's a great place as well. And Jazz Showcase has been going since 1947. So also quite historic.
Nice to see. All right.
This is a bit different, but is Howl at the Moon still there?
I think it's still there, unfortunately.
Nice. Our next poll is something, you know, Chicago's famous for many things. What is one of these claim to fames? One of the following Chicago is known for as the United States capital. Is it shipping, financial, urban agriculture, railroad, or the foodie capital? So give us your best guess if you don't know for certain. Everybody's waiting to see what the others pick, so they.
I haven't figured out how to see the results, so I can't even cheat. Why does the water look so green there? Your other picture showed that as well.
Magic, I don't know.
Okay, but I mean, is it pretty clean water now? Have they figured out how to keep it clean?
It's a lot cleaner. I mean, there's lots of kayaks on there now, lots of little boats and things like that.
Okay.
I think the Chicago River has always looked green, and it's much greener on St. Patrick's Day, but it does naturally have that green look to it.
Yep.
And how deep is it? Like, where were your, I mean, can big boats get through there? I mean, obviously the bridges are an issue, but can you, I mean, how deep?
Yeah, huge boats go through there. Barges go through and all that. There's actually a lock system. I didn't mention it before, but that's like, so there are, because we reverse the flow, there are locks. And so, you know, when you go through there, you can see it drops at least 6 to 10 feet, I think, you know, to in between.
So just to wrap this one up, yep, Chicago is known as the United States railroad capital, with more major railroads serving the city than any other place in America. So
those railroads first started coming through in 1848, the same year that the canal was completed. So that's why Chicago became the center of transportation for rail, for water, and all that. So, okay, so now we're actually walking across the river. This is like the actual view when I was actually walking. Hold on.
Did you take these pictures just for this event?
I did, like 2 weeks ago. So there's your view of the river. And here's another view.
Full service guide. She's even got her guide shirt on. I don't know.
I have my name tag on too.
Tina, that building right there on the right, that is just a gorgeous building. I don't know what it is, but
you'll find out in like 5 minutes.
Oh, sorry. What's new? I love that building.
Yeah. All right. So right on the other side of the river that we walked across the bridge, there's a statue of Jean Baptiste Pont du Sable. This is the bust of him, and this is where his home was. You know, he had that fur trading post. He was the first permanent resident here. And we keep walking. But I didn't have so you walk around his bust there, and the Apple store is there. I should have taken a picture of that. So just for your point of reference here. So now we're at the Illinois Center, completed in 1970. By the office of Ludwig Mies van der Rohe. So we're looking specifically at the building that has that big C on it, that brown building. That C is the Chicago Architecture Center. And right below it on the water is the First Lady, the boat, where they do the boat tours, the boat architecture tours. So we moved our offices there, or the center there, 3 years ago, I think it was. And so now there's a gift shop in there. There's lots of displays. There's models of buildings. I also volunteer there as an exhibit host, where you wander around and tell people about them. And that's where most of our walking tours start from. So that is where we would have started, and we would walk around the loop a little bit and came back, went over the river, and now we're looking at it from here. And so this entire area was called Illinois Center, and it was planned development because in the late 60s, the first Mayor Daley was noticing that no one was living downtown. Everyone was like going to the suburbs. Companies were moving out of town. He's trying to keep businesses and people in the city. So this was a bunch of railroad tracks, ugly manufacturing. And so he thought, we need to do something else. And so they built over the railroad tracks. What you can see here, I'll get a better picture in a minute, is the 2-level Wacker Drive. You can kind of see here where those banners are that says you're on Potawatomi land. That's kind of covering up the 2-level Wacker Drive that Michelle was mentioning before, the different levels. Those levels that was part of Daniel Burnham's 1909 plan of Chicago. He envisioned, a second level that would service these other, could serve as a passageway, underground, to bypass the busy areas and also to service these buildings. So this particular building that was designed by the office of Ludwig Mies van der Rohe, if you've ever heard of him, he's a German architect. He came to Chicago. He had been the head of the Bauhaus in Germany, which was closed by Hitler. It was an architecture and art school. He was invited to come to Chicago to design and become the head of architecture at the Illinois Institute of Technology, which is just south of downtown. He designed the campus. Again, he's famous for lots of phrases such as less is more. And so as you can see from this building, less is more. It's very simple. Or is it? Here you can see the structure. You can see, because it's clad in glass, you can see that it's a skeleton frame structure, emphasizing volume instead of mass. We don't have this big concrete, it's all glass. He also said that, God is in the details. So his lack of ornamentation, those are the details, and that's what made it distinctive. Some people also refer to this as the international style because this building could be anywhere in the world and it would fit in. And so this area where this building is, this Illinois Center, the mayor envisioned people working, living, and staying downtown. So this was an office building, but there was a hotel built, there was a fire station. They envisioned a school, so that they could keep people more downtown. So I said these were built over the railroad tracks. This was probably one of the first times where the air rights to anything were ever sold so that they could build on top of it to create these buildings. This is just another view. That's a Hyatt hotel there. So again, there's living, there's working. Okay, so now we're moving on to another building. This is NBC Tower. It's just down the block from here. So after people were saying, Mies van der Rohe and less is more, some people thought less is a bore. And so this is the NBC Tower, completed in 1989 by Skidmore, Owings and Merrill. Less is a bore translates to postmodern architecture, where you have some historical styles, but still a very modern design, modern technology. I put in Adrian Smith as the principal architect here. He is known for designing the Burj Khalifa in Dubai, and he is the designer of the tower I don't think it's completed yet. I've just forgotten what it is now. I totally forgot. It's being built as the newest, tallest building in the world. So he's like the star architect from Chicago.
Is that the tower in Saudi Arabia, Tina?
Yes.
That they're
I just forgot what it's called.
Kingdom Tower?
Yes.
Tower, maybe. Okay.
Yeah, it is Kingdom Tower. Yeah, there's a model of it in the CAC, and it takes up the 2 stories because it's built to scale, and it's kind of crazy. It looked like there's a helicopter landing pad on top too, or observation area of some kind. So this is postmodern style. So we see some elements of historic elements, and it's modern at the same time. Does this look a little bit similar to anything we've seen before?
Yeah, it's kind of close to Art Deco.
Yeah, and it's NBC Tower. It kind of looks a little bit like the Chrysler Building, maybe,
Oh,
in New York. Let me see here.
I was gonna say Rockefeller Center, but yeah.
Yep. Oh,
which
actually,
is where NBC is in New York.
Exactly. Let me go back up here.
But it's got buttresses like Notre Dame at the very top.
These right here, right? These squares.
Well, the squares, but the picture you just showed a second ago at the
I know,
top.
yes, that's a different building.
Oh, okay.
Myself, but so these, in this picture, those squares at the top, those are supports. So those are flying buttresses, you know, a form of flying buttresses, but here it's actually a support. But to Michelle's point, this is a building across the street. This is the Tribune Tower, which also has flying buttresses, but these are decorative, like they're not supportive. So, you know, a lot of buildings are built near each other and they kind of maybe, you know, to pay homage to the building, you know, next door or across the way, they have similar traits. And this is a little bit more detailed, the lobby, it's hard to see here, but it's, you know, more Art Deco, the geometric, the gold. Okay, so now we're moving to just beer. And this is because, you know, in the 80s and 90s, this became very popular here in Chicago.
By you guys.
Where'd Sean go?
I'm here.
Talk about beer.
All right. Well, yeah, so these are some of the best places to go. So Goose Island, of course, still a little chagrin. They sold out to, I think it was Budweiser or whomever, but so that was the first microbrewery in the city. Actually, the city had breweries prior to Prohibition, but of course they went out of business. That's why Wisconsin it all moved up to Wisconsin. And there's some interesting books about the brewery wars also back then. But anyway, Goose Island, that's kind of west of Lincoln Park, great place. Hop Leaf is probably my favorite bar in the city. Also serves food. This is one of the first bars that had hundreds of beers available, 40 on tap, all Belgian. And there's a glass for each beer that, because of course the Belgians, you know, you might have seen different fluted glasses, and they believe that, you know, the glass is a big part of how you enjoy their beer. So each beer you get on tap comes in a glass from the brewery. But a great place, got a beer garden out in the back. Even they've expanded to the next building, so there's more space because it was so popular. It get absolutely packed, kind of like what you see outside of Murphy's bleachers. It's kind of felt like inside because it's such a great place, so popular. They even had 3 different types of mead, so which is honey fermented drink, similar to beer. And then Murphy's, this is right across from the entrance to the bleachers at Wrigley Field. Great. That one of my favorite places to go before or after a game. You can all along the side, in the front and along the side is big open beer garden. They've got an open space inside. So great place to go before and after games. I'll give a shout out to Bernie's. So if Murphy's is too crowded, go to Bernie's, the other side of Wrigley, also a great place to go before or after Cub games.
All right, so we're still in Illinois Center, but we're looking a little bit east of there. This new area is still part of the Illinois Center plan development, but they're calling this portion Lakeshore East. Again, this was built over the train tracks, trying to keep people downtown. There was a 9-hole golf course at one point here, but now there's a public park, there's schools now, there's still hotels. You see here the Swiss Hotel. So it's just a continued development of that Illinois Center. All the names of the buildings are you know, water related. There's Regatta, there's, you know, this next building that we're going to talk about, Aqua. So Aqua is the building in the back that has the wavy balconies. It was completed in 2009, designed by Studio Gang Architects. I'll click on this other picture. This is just a stock photo here. Studio Gang is run by Jeannie Gang, who is a woman. And so this building, when it was completed, it's the tallest building in the world, designed by a woman. Her inspiration here was like cliff outcrops along the Mississippi River. And, you know, it's a concrete building, and these balconies are all computer designed so that it creates this wave effect. I believe this building is LEED certified. The windows are tinted so that birds don't fly into it as much. So it has a lot of features like that, and to maximize like the shading on the building as well.
I
Are
love
those
that
balconies
building every
functional?
time I go past it on the architecture tour.
Yeah, those balconies are functional. Those balconies are functional, and I was told, they're none of them are like, they're not identical,
Yeah.
and they're not square where there's right on top of each other. She was also trying to create a neighborhood effect where, since they come out at different angles, you could be on your balcony, but then you could see your neighbor and be like, hey neighbor, can I borrow a cup of sugar or something, just to make it more neighborhoody, was the slight intent there. It's also the Radisson Blue Hotel. So again, these buildings can't exist just as a condominium or apartment. There's more to it than that.
Oh, how pathetic. That is where I stayed for the 60th, and I don't even think I realized I was in that building.
Oh,
But I was at the Radisson Blue. Yeah.
that was the building you were in.
Michelle.
So this is a building I think Chris was talking about. This is Vista. This is the 3-tower building you see there, completed in 2020, also designed by Studio Gang. So this is now the 3rd tallest building in Chicago and the tallest building in the world designed by a woman. I don't actually know the real name. Like, it was called Vista for the longest time, and it's, this is apartments and it will be a hotel. It's not, I think some people might be living there, but it's not really done yet.
That's gorgeous. Where-ish is it? Sort of where?
This is right on the river, just right next to the Swiss Hotel. It's in Lakeshore East. You can access it from Upper Wacker there, and also from the Lakeshore East Park, I believe, if you come off of Randolph. So
On the south side of the river?
yes, this is on the south side of the river.
Now, is this Studio Gang? I mean, I'm seeing waves again. Is that sort of their style? They seem to.
I think she's just influenced by nature. In this case, one of the docents actually reached out to her, and she was influenced here more by like some fluorite crystals. That's why it's actually a little bit more angular. But you'll notice right here at the top, there's a big opening up there. That's called the blow-through floor. That's like on the 83rd floor maybe or so. So that the wind could just blow through so the pressure wouldn't be as great, so that there is not as much sway to the building. So there's just mechanicals up there. It's like a screen that goes around it. Yeah, that's the 83rd floor to offer relief from the wind forces. So they're the 3 connected towers. Someone actually talked to her. She was also, when they were designing this building, they thought like, how would it look? And so they actually stacked popcorn boxes, that you'd get at the movie theater, like the kind of angular ones on top of each other to kind of create this effect. So here's another view. This is one that I took myself. So you can see, the Swiss Hotel is right there. Aqua is right behind it.
Oh, wow.
So cool. Amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, it really has changed the skyline, I think. When you see it when you're driving in from the expressway, like miles away now. And it looks really cool. And it lines up with Grant Park. When you look at it, you can look straight over, the parks too.
And you said it's mixed use, so it's residential and commercial?
I don't think there's any commercial. It's a hotel, St. Regis Hotel.
Oh, it's a hotel. Oh, okay.
Is St. Regis open?
And
Wow.
I don't think it's open yet, and condos. So it's all residential. So I think the condos are high-end condos serviced by the St. Regis as well,
It's very feminine looking. There's something about it that's very.
Yeah, maybe the waves, and I think
Curviness.
Curvy.
cool too.
Yeah.
So, and then it's not 100% done yet, because I haven't seen it, but you will have access direct to the Riverwalk right below too. Like right now, that's like where Urban Kayaks has their place, but I think there'll be a way to walk right into the building somehow. And I think they've already set up the restaurants for the hotel will be Alinea, the group from Alinea, which is a high-end restaurant here in Chicago. They'll be running the hotel restaurants and bars.
The website says the hotel is opening in March of 2022.
Okay, cool.
All right, it is time for our 5th and final poll. So we've heard a lot about a lot of bars and drinking establishments, and maybe it was on the list that we talked about, maybe it wasn't, but which is the oldest continuously run bar in Chicago? The Berghoff, the Green Mill, which were in our presentation, the Chip Inn, Durkin's, or Marge's Still?
Well, Sean can't answer this. He's gonna know.
Maybe he's not.
Stay quiet.
It's anonymous.
I don't remember already.
Well, it may not have been presented to you. We don't know.
You know,
The
I
other ones I all knew, but that one's a total guess, so.
Don't know.
I used to live in the O'Hare Airport, and yet I never made it to Chicago but twice in my life. Sad. Tina, you're gonna have to show me the bars
Yeah, I know.
live next.
I'm
Right.
telling you, I live here since 1990 and I've gone to a lot of these places, but this is making me really want to go just do tours and, go to the bars. I
Maybe
can't
Sean-
wait.
Maybe Sean will lead us in a, in-person tour sooner than later.
Oh, I forgot I made a mistake in my guess. Bad me.
Tell us what your guess you want it to be.
Well, I guess the Berghoff, because it is liquor license number 1, but it was closed for a
That's
short
right.
while in the 2000s. So
You were paying attention.
I was paying attention.
You just hit the wrong button.
Well, so this is the oldest continuously run.
Yes,
Um,
you
so it's
got it.
actually- It's actually
is it?
it's the lesser known Chip Inn, which is in Noble Square. It's like in the middle of a residential area. So you'd be unlikely to run across it unless you were looking for it. But it dates back to 1897. So Green Mill dates back to 1907, so it's a little bit older. Marge's still is actually older, but not continuously run, despite whatever their website may claim. It was actually closed for at least a few years and was completely gutted and renovated, but is a very cool place. So Marge's still is a double entendre because they used to make bathtub gin upstairs during Prohibition. And it was called something before Marge's, but I actually one time went in there right before. So Marge must have been in the 80s, possibly older at the time, and not the original owner, but she ran it for a long period of time. And I swear to God, she was smoking pot at the end of the bar. So long before it was legal. But yeah, so the Chip Inn, very cool place. Actually have a big chili cook-off every year, at least pre-COVID. So hopefully they'll keep that going. I used to play softball in Noble Square Park, which is not far from there. So that's something that even a lot of Chicagoans have never heard of because of its location.
So these last couple slides are just some, just a transition to, we were in the, Lakeshore East and buildings that were built just last year. So what's popular now here, and they've always been, are outdoor bars. So I added a couple pictures here. We don't really have historic stories about them. This is offshore at Navy Pier. I just like the view here. I haven't been here yet, but they're calling it the largest outdoor bar in the world, but it's on top of Navy Pier here. And then these two are, I've been to both of these. On the left is Cindy's Rooftop. It's on top of a historic building, Chicago Athletic Association Hotel. And the one on the right is the LH Rooftop, the London House Hotel Rooftop Bar. And these are both historic buildings. They were both, one was an athletic club, one was an office building that have been converted to hotels and now have rooftop bars. So they're probably even more popular now post-COVID just because they've been able to stay open. Right before the shutdown, I was actually training for a new tour called Hotel Boom. And it was basically saying how the tour was about how all these buildings have been converted to hotels downtown. And these two were on it. And I had told some iSectors, I'm like, okay, I will give that tour, but we'll actually be going to the bars, not just talking about the buildings. And so maybe this could be something we do next May as well.
Well, that'd be fun.
And then I just ended with this flag because when we're walking back on Michigan Avenue, on the Michigan Avenue Bridge, DuSable Bridge, there's tons of Chicago City flags. So this could be your test about what do the parts of the flag mean? Does anybody have any ideas on what the blue means on the flag?
The river?
River?
The lake.
And the lake, yeah. So I believe one of the stripes is for the lake and the north side, north branch of the river, and the other portion, I had to look it up. It's the south branch and the canal are that. The white portions are the north, south, and west sides of Chicago. And what about the stars? Anybody have any idea? 4 major things here in Chicago. We talked about 3 of them.
Bars, taverns, saloons.
So the first star is for Fort Dearborn, which we talked about briefly. And then the second star is for the Great Chicago Fire. The third star is the 1893 World's Columbian Exposition, the World's Fair. And then the last star we didn't talk about at all was the Century of Progress, which was also another World's Fair from 1933. So that's what the Chicago City flag means. So that is basically the end of our tour. And this is how I ended in front of the building. You know, I hope you guys learned a little bit about Chicago history and how technology evolved over time and tastes changed and how the buildings have developed here in Chicago. I hope you enjoyed it. And I encourage you to take more tours when you're here in Chicago and support the Chicago Architecture Center. And thanks to John for contributing all his knowledge from his book, The Historic Bars of Chicago, available on Amazon and other places. I have an extra copy here if anyone wants one. I know we went way over time, but I mean, I hope you guys enjoyed it, and it's been fun for me. So thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. This was amazing. Really, it was
Yeah, thank you.
so interesting.
Oh, by the way, Tina, Tina, and talk so much about architecture. Would you like to be a guest in my architecture class for high school? A guest speaker? I mean, talk about history of Chicago architecture or something.
I could. Just let me know.
All right. So, so if I get your email address, I will stay in touch and I will try to schedule it.
Okay, that sounds good. I did do an awesome presentation for some third graders some years ago. So.
Awesome. Yeah, okay. All right. Cool.
Well,
So,
I have.
What's your email again, Tina? Please.
I'm sure Maggie can connect us.
Okay, right. Sounds good. All right.
I was just going to say, I was very disappointed when I was turning around and coming home to my house to do a video call. But I have to say, that was awesome, Tina and Sean. That was great. I'm definitely buying your book, Sean. And I'm sure there's lots of bars that I'm going to just check off as I go to them. So that was awesome. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Yeah. Tina, I was curious, how did you become a docent? Like, why did you?
So funny you should ask, because two of the people on this call helped me decide to do that. I had heard about it years ago, just because I've always liked Chicago history. But then I found out that the qualification, like you had to interview, you had to apply and interview, and then the training was going to be like, you had to go every Saturday for 8 hours a day. And I'm thinking, this was, right after college. And I thought, I'm footloose and fancy free. I'm traveling the world. There's no way I'm going to have time for that. And then I met someone that did it, a friend of mine. I'm like, wait a minute, I wanted to do that, but you did it. And then I think I saw something, and it was Sandy and Bob. We had lunch together. I said, I think I'm going to apply for this. And I have this interview. I don't know what I should say, or I think you had to describe something. I don't even remember. You describe your favorite building or talk about something. And both Sandy and Bob said, oh, you'll do great. You'll do great. You need to do this. So I applied, but then I didn't get in. I was waitlisted. And then right before the class started, they let me in. So that was 10 years ago. I organize all the get-togethers for my class. Most of the people in my class are retired or were retired. Teachers, lawyers, salespeople. So they just want to keep doing something. And some people from my class were just out of college and younger. There was nobody, in their, 40s with a small child. So
she worked her butt off on that one. But congratulations, Tina, all the time that you keep this up, because it's not just the training and then it's done. She has to do so many tours to keep that.
Yeah, and actually Sandy and Bob and Cindy, who is not here today, who was supposed to be they all came on my practice tours, and you have to be certified. You're certified by your peers, so it's like a year-long training essentially. But we got lectures from architects and historians, and so it was great. They've changed it a little bit, but it's been great.
Well, thank you everybody for coming, and thank you for, wow, it's close to almost 2 hours. We weren't certain how long this would go, but I think it's a good thing we planned it for a Saturday, because nobody had to rush off and we got a lot of time to chat and to catch up. I'm willing to hang out if anybody else needs to hang out for a little bit, but I just want to say thanks again to Tina and Sean for putting this together. It was a lot of fun organizing it. And if this is of interest to folks, maybe we can look at other big cities or other things similar to this that we could still do in a virtual sense. So thank you, Sean. Thank you, Tina. Big kudos to you. Thank you.
Yeah, I think this was a great presentation. Thank you guys so much.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And
Well, I look forward to drinking with everybody soon. So I do got to run though. So cheers, guys.
Bye, Chris.
See you.
Bye.
Guys, good job.
Thank you. Bye.
Yeah, definitely hopefully in person in the spring. That would be nice.
Thank you, Maggie, for pulling all this together.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks everybody.
If we had done this in person, it was a 90-minute walking tour. This was actually longer.